still remember the exact moment I said it. The community center was almost empty. Folding chairs were stacked against the wall, and volunteers were cleaning up after another long day of serving meals to families who had nowhere else to go. I was carrying a box of donated blankets when I saw her standing by the doorway, helping an elderly woman put on a winter coat. Even after all these years, there was something about her smile that made the room feel warmer. I shook my head and laughed. 20 years ago, I'd have married you. It was meant as a joke. A harmless comment between two old friends who had spent decades crossing paths at charity events, food drives, and community projects. But then she looked at me. Really looked at me. And in a voice so soft I almost missed it, she whispered, "Why not now?" For a second, the entire world seemed to stop. The sound of people talking faded away. The scrape of chairs disappeared. There was only her. And the question I never expected to hear. Why not now? My name is Daniel, and at 62 years old, I thought the biggest chapters of my life were already written. I had been married once. My wife, Emily, had passed away 8 years earlier after a long battle with cancer. After losing her, I buried myself in work and volunteer projects. Helping others felt easier than facing my own loneliness. You can avoid empty houses by staying busy. You can avoid silence by surrounding yourself with people. But eventually, every volunteer shift ends. Every event finishes. And every night, you still go home alone. The woman standing in front of me was Sarah. We had known each other for over 20 years. Not closely. Not the kind of friendship where you talk every day. But our lives seemed to orbit around the same causes. Whenever there was a fundraiser, she was there. Whenever a family needed help, she showed up. Whenever someone was hurting, somehow Sarah found a way to make things better. She had spent most of her life taking care of other people. First her parents. Then her younger brother after a devastating accident left him disabled. Then countless strangers who needed kindness. She never married. Never had children. And never complained. At least not publicly. I stared at her. You can't be serious. A small smile appeared on her face. I'm serious. I laughed nervously. Sarah, we're not 20 anymore. No, she said. We're not. There was no bitterness in her voice. No regret. Just honesty. And somehow that made it even harder to answer. A week later, I found myself thinking about her constantly. Not because of what she said. Because of what I couldn't stop wondering. What if? What if life had been different? What if we had met under different circumstances? What if I hadn't spent years believing certain opportunities only belonged to younger people? Eventually, I called her. Would you like to have dinner? She laughed. Took you long enough. That dinner lasted for hours. Then another dinner happened. Then another. For the first time in years, I found myself looking forward to something other than work. I looked forward to her stories. Her laugh. Her stubborn optimism. The way she remembered the names of people everyone else forgot. The way she treated every person with dignity. One evening, while walking through a neighborhood park, I finally asked something that had been bothering me. Why didn't you ever get married? Sarah was quiet for a moment. I came close once. What happened? My mother got sick. I nodded. I stayed to take care of her. And after that? She smiled sadly. Life kept giving me people who needed me. The answer broke my heart. Not because she regretted helping them. Because I realized how many dreams she had quietly sacrificed. Do you ever wish you'd chosen differently? I asked. She stopped walking. Then she looked at me. Never. I frowned. Never? No. She pointed toward a playground where children were laughing. Those years mattered to someone. Then she pointed toward a homeless shelter across the street. And so did those. Her eyes became emotional. Kindness is never wasted, Daniel. That sentence stayed with me. Kindness is never wasted. A few months later, life tested those words. Sarah collapsed during a volunteer event. One moment she was organizing donated groceries. The next, she was on the floor. The ambulance arrived within minutes. I followed it to the hospital. The hours that followed were some of the longest of my life. Eventually a doctor came out. Sarah was stable. But there was a problem with her heart. A serious one. The treatment was possible. The recovery would be difficult. I sat beside her hospital bed that night. For the first time since I had known her, she looked frightened. Not for herself. For everyone else. The shelter fundraiser is next week, she whispered. I stared at her. You're worried about a fundraiser. People are counting on it. I laughed despite the tears in my eyes. Sarah, you're impossible. She smiled weakly. The next morning, I started making phone calls. Then more phone calls. Then hundreds of them. Volunteers appeared from everywhere. People I had never met wanted to help. Business owners donated supplies. Local organizations offered support. Former students. Single mothers. Retirees. Veterans. Families. One by one they came forward. I didn't understand why. Then I started hearing their stories. She paid my rent when I lost my job. She brought groceries when my husband died. She sat with my father every week at the nursing home. She helped me get through cancer. She never let me feel alone. The stories never ended. For 20 years, Sarah had quietly changed lives. And now those lives were showing up for her. The fundraiser became the biggest event the shelter had ever seen. Thousands of people attended. Donations shattered every previous record. When I visited Sarah afterward and showed her the photos, she cried. Not because of the money. Because of the people. I don't deserve this, she whispered. Yes, you do. No. Yes. She shook her head. I just tried to help. I squeezed her hand. That's exactly why. Her recovery took months. During that time, I learned something important. Love isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's showing up. Again and again. It's driving someone to appointments. Picking up groceries. Sitting quietly when they're tired. Making soup. Listening. Waiting. Staying. 1 year after her surgery, we returned to the same community center where everything had started. The same stacked chairs. The same folding tables. The same doorway. Only this time, our lives were different. We stood watching volunteers prepare meals. Young volunteers. Older volunteers. Families volunteering together. People helping people. Sarah smiled. Look at that. What? All those good people. I looked around. Then I looked at her. You know whose fault that is. She laughed. Mine. Yours. Before she could answer, I reached into my pocket. Her eyes widened. Daniel. My hands were shaking. At 63 years old, I felt more nervous than I had at 23. You once asked me a question. Tears immediately filled her eyes. I continued. You asked why not now. The room seemed to disappear again. Just like it had a year earlier. I didn't have a good answer then. I took a deep breath. But I do now. I got down on one knee. The volunteers nearby stopped talking. A few gasped. Sarah covered her mouth. You spent your entire life loving people who needed love. My voice cracked. You spent your entire life showing up for everyone else. Tears streamed down her face. And if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life showing up for you." The room was completely silent. For one beautiful moment, nobody moved. Then Sarah laughed through her tears. The same warm laugh that had brightened countless difficult days. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." The volunteers erupted into cheers. People hugged. Someone started crying. Actually, several people started crying. Including me. Later that evening, as we sat together watching the sunset, Sarah rested her head on my shoulder. "You know," she said softly, "most people think the best stories happen when you're young." I smiled. "Maybe they're wrong." She nodded. "Maybe the best stories happen when you finally learned what's important." I wrapped my arm around her. And as the sun disappeared below the horizon, surrounded by a life built on kindness, service, and humanity, I realized something beautiful. Love doesn't care how old you are. It doesn't follow a schedule. It doesn't ask whether the timing is perfect. Sometimes it simply waits. Patiently. Quietly. For two people to stop looking backward at what might have been. And finally say yes to what still can be.